Happy Thursday, everyone. Very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be joining us from. Thank you for being here at Code Live. I'm your host, Sam Basu, and thankfully I'm not coding today because I have a very good friend and an absolute awesome person with some awesome stuff to show us, Mr. Allan Ritchie. How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. All right, so let me set up a couple of things. Yeah, it looks like your camera blurred out for a minute, but now it's back. So we are good. We are good. So, hey, it's Thursday. It's time for the dotNET Dev Show. Hang on. Are we still on? Trying to see if the stream went numb. No, it's still good. So probably a network blip maybe on my side. So we're still good. We're still live on the internet, which is where we belong nowadays because we can't hang out in person, right? We just hang out on the internet.
Right now, MVP Summit's going on and you can't go anywhere right now.
Yeah. Well, this is the second year in a row that we had to go virtual. Like last year, they had to pivot like within like a couple of weeks' notice. This time around, I mean, everybody has been doing it for a year now, so things were a little better. So, anyways, this is Thursday. It's the dotNET Dev Show. We talk about all things dotNET. You see me code things in Xamarin and Blazor and so on. But today, I want to talk about something that is super fun, and Allan is the creator. So, Allan, why don't you first go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name's Allan Ritchie. I'm a Microsoft MVP, former Xamarin MVP when that was a thing. I'm not sure. It's been 3 or 4 years now, I guess, since they've been acquired. I've been doing open source for close to 10 years now.
Wow.
I've been doing development for 20 years, back since .NET kind of first released 1.0. So I've been around the block. I know a whole bunch of these other languages too. But it shows. It shows, right?
So some of us are aging a little bit, like it or not. Yeah, I started back in like .NET 1 dot something, and by the time like it was 2.0, we were shipping like production apps. So yeah, it's been around. Allan, looks like your camera is still trying to catch up a little bit. It's just still a little blurry, but your audio comes through just fine.
It shows fine on mine. It's a pretty good webcam.
Yeah, no, your webcam is fine because you were crystal clear. But yeah, maybe it's just something on my network. You're just coming across a little blurry, maybe. But yeah, we can go on, and then hopefully it'll catch up. So, let's also talk about like where you are because you're Canadian, right?
Yes. Yep.
Okay, and you're in Toronto.
Yes, I am.
Ontario. I don't normally get to talk to people who are kind of like close by. I'm in Erie, Pennsylvania, so right across the pond, Lake Erie, and we go down to Buffalo and we cross the bridge and into Canada so many times. But it's just been weird. Like in the last like 15 years, I've never seen that border closed, but it's been closed.
Yeah.
So yeah,
now.
Yeah, we can't go into Canada or vice versa so easily. But hopefully then there is light at the end of the tunnel. We are kind of coming, hopefully, to the close of the pandemic as we know it. And hopefully by the end of this year, things are a little bit more normal. But it was funny, Allan, you were mentioning it's April 1st, so it's not an April Fool's joke, but it is snowing where you and me are.
Yeah, it's... I woke up this morning. I actually thought it was pollen. I thought it was going to be another kind of springish day. And then I got up and I walked to the window and I looked out and I'm like, that's not pollen. That is snow.
Yeah. Our kid is excited and he's like, one more day of snow play. I'm like, okay, go do your snow play. But anyways, so Allan and me have spent a lot of time with XAML and Xamarin Forms and other like stacks. But you are the creator of something called Shiny.net. So tell us what it is, how did you get started, and what exactly are you trying to solve?
So Shiny is a way of making kind of your device hardware and background services work in kind of a cross-platform way that's a little bit friendlier than kind of the plugin environments that we've been using over the years. I've written several plugins over the years, like Bluetooth LE, Geofencing, some GPS stuff. James Montemango and I kind of shared a bunch of plugins over the years. But stuff that tended to happen with those plugins is people always wanted to bring in stuff like DI, or they were like, hey, this event's not firing in the background. And there's so many problems and documentation that you needed to write to explain people how to do this. It just became problematic over the years. So, and I found as I was writing these plugins, like you always needed to store, you needed some sort of data store, and various services that just were, you always had to copy and paste them or bring in some library to do it for you. And it just kind of got annoying, and you ended up with this hodgepodge of like 4 million plugins. And I decided, I kind of saw everybody, like, I guess I call them the big three. The MVVM frameworks are kind of done. They're out there. You know, you've got your Prism, your Reactive UIs, your MVVM
cross.
Yeah. But nobody was really tackling this problem. And this was a huge problem. I mean, it was a genuine need. I kept seeing, I do full-time consulting, software engineering, and I kept seeing same mistakes. People writing these really kind of complex frameworks and tying these services in with their business logic, and it just wasn't working. So as I started to look at this problem, I was like, why don't we have something that's a little more focused and allows us to write testable code and work with stuff like dependency injection and kind of force stability on these things that should be easy. And as I've done this over the years, I mean, iOS and Android, iOS generally tends to make everything easy. I know some people find that surprising. But you enter Android and they change the game up on you every year, basically. And I got tired of dealing with that, right? You got to go in and update like 10 different code bases. Now I just have to update one and release NuGet, and I'm good.
So Allan, I got a couple of questions on this, but let's try doing this real quick. Like on your side, could you stop sharing the camera for a second and then restart it back? Let's see if that fixes your blurriness.
Yep.
And come back on. For some reason, your camera is looking a little blurry.
It must be network, because I've got it's showing a pretty clear stream on my end.
Yeah, it's on the stream as well. Now it's a little better. Okay. Yeah, maybe now it's better. Yeah.
I don't have any network problems on my end. It's showing the hub is going pretty good. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, we can hear you perfectly clear, so that's important.
All right. Well, I'll be sharing probably my desktop in a few. So
yeah.
Have to worry too much about it.
So I want to get back to this a little bit. So I know like James Montemagno and so many folks in the community, and you are one of the leading folks who maintained those plugins, right? And it was painful because sometimes you had multiple plugins to do the same thing, because as an enterprise developer, maybe you just didn't know which one to use at times, and then it was constant maintenance, right? Because there are things changing on iOS and Android.
Yep. Constant.
So. Yeah, so with the whole Xamarin Essentials move now, Microsoft is wanting to take over that, and I think they have like 30 or so APIs, maybe a little bit more, on device-specific things they expose. But what you're talking about is more about like background things that you want out of those sensors.
Yep. It is, and I also do some of the APIs that they probably don't want to tackle. For instance, ToothLE. I've had many conversations with them. It's a monstrous API.
Yeah.
And you pretty much need the whole stack out of it. Like if you're doing anything real with Bluetooth, you need it all. Like you can't have just an essential API. You need stuff like pairing and reading RSSIs and all that stuff. And they could spend weeks just on one API going through it, right. And that's not really essential, right? That becomes more of a product at that point. So they just didn't want to tackle that stuff. Some of the backgrounding. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I said makes sense. Why, like Essentials, they actually include that with every Xamarin project now, and you're talking about very specific things that, like, unless you have a need for that in your app, you don't want that as a NuGet package.
Yep. They also, there's a lot of things like Shiny has at its core is background jobs, so periodic jobs that run, which is quite common for a lot of apps. And you need a lot of kind of under the hood stuff to get those running well and to bring your services to them. And they didn't really want to do that because it goes from being just a plugin or a simple set of static APIs to a full-blown framework. And I get that that's a hard transition to make, right? They might be able to do that with Maui a little bit better in the future, but certainly there's a lot of shifting and effort that goes into making that happen. They just didn't want to do it, which I can't blame them. So
So when I posted a link to Shiny on GitHub. When did you start on this? How many years back?
It was about 2 years back where I started to merge these things together. Like I said, I've done a lot of the plugins over the years, so some of them just kind of got enveloped by this, and then I started to delete a lot of code that didn't need to be in the plugins anymore because it was really hosted by the Shiny core.
Right.
And it made kind of the whole seamless transition. It made it actually to the point where I could do a large portion of unit and integration testing on the suite as a whole, which that was something that really needed to be done because it's such a difficult beast sometimes to deal with.
Yeah. So Shiny, as it stands today, it's entirely open source, and you have NuGet packages for, I mean, not just Xamarin, right? You got some other things.
It's basically Android and iOS is the primary focus. I do deal with UWP. UWP I kind of treat as a second class, just because it's not. Plus, with that whole ecosystem kind of undergoing an evolution right now.
Yeah,
it's kind of hard to plot where it's going to hit, but there are people using it. I still get some PRs for it occasionally. I try and support it because it's fairly easy to test with. I mean, UWP just launches and you're up and running, but the APIs are sometimes a little bit hectic. Bluetooth being specifically, they started off with good intentions and then it kind of fell off the rails at some point. So.
Yeah, and like you said, like the whole Windows stack is being kind of overhauled right now with WinUI 3 and Project Reunion. So like UWP as a stack is, I mean, it might still have a future, but it might get just engulfed in WinUI 3, which is kind of the next generation anyway. So yeah, there are things shifting in the Windows world. Okay, so
I didn't know where that was going to land. I still don't know where it's entirely going to land. So I'm just going to wait that one out.
Yeah, sometimes like Mike, and there are some great folks working on this, Ryan Dimopoulos and Miguel Ramos. But sometimes with Microsoft's messaging, it leads to a little bit of confusion because like WinUI 2 was a completely different thing, and WinUI 3 is more of a end-to-end UX stack. So let's just wait until the dust kind of settles on that because they're not ready yet. I mean, they are at Project Reunion 0.5, which is the first official and supported version of WinUI 3 per se. But by November, I'm guessing we will have much more clarity as to how things evolve with like .NET 6 and forward. So yeah, so you have everything on GitHub for your repos. Do you want to show us anything? I can bring up your desktop.
Sure. I was going to just show some of the simple stuff. So Shiny is a whole bunch of services. Unfortunately, we can't. There's no way to actually enlarge this section of the.
See, this is one thing Visual Studio for Mac does better than Visual Studio on Windows because I can enlarge the zoom in on the Solution Explorer.
So I'll try and highlight or at least put my mouse on what I'm talking about, and people can kind of blur in there. So Shiny does a whole bunch of these background services like beacons, BLE. Locations, which is actually geofencing, GPS, and something called motion activity. That's basically tracking are you running, walking, in an automobile, stuff like that. I do NFC, background, upload and downloads, push notifications. That's actually a big one, and local notifications. And last but not least, sensors. So a couple of these things are overlap with Essentials. Obviously sensors they pretty much cover now. What else do they cover? They do cover some of the location stuff, but not the background at all. And I think they're looking at notifications. I'm not sure if that's going to come out or not because notifications is a funny one. Obviously when we talk about device backgrounding, Notifications kind of stands out as a sore thumb in Shiny because it's not really device hardware. The problem is when you're working with the background, this kind of goes hand in hand with everything you do, whether you're running a periodic job or you need something for push notifications. You're going to end up using local notifications at some point.
Yeah.
So this is actually a fully featured plugin within Shiny. It does the scheduled logging and all the fun stuff that you really don't get out of the box with Android.
Interesting. So the notifications package is for local notifications, correct?
Yes. And
then I see another one that is push.azure notification hubs. What is that for?
Yeah. So local notifications is still used in the push mechanisms because Android won't actually trigger a notification if you don't do it for it. So it piggybacks in there. But push is an interesting one. This is kind of more a provider mechanism, which I'll show more in a few minutes. My good friend Dan Siegel, he kind of tends to poke at me every time he needs one of these things. And App Center shut down their push notifications about a year ago. Yeah. And I know that was a bit of a hit to the community because Xamarin really doesn't have a focus of what to hit there. And there's not really a lot of guidance coming out. And the fact is these push providers, they kind of come and go, yearly, right? I think we had Hockey App for a while that did them. I think there's 4 of them out there now between AWS, OneSignal, Firebase, which is obviously a big one, and Azure notification hubs. And then there's still some people doing native. The funny thing is that they all work the same. They all use under the hood, they're all using native. And it's really, when you start to put it on the phone, it can look a little bit overwhelming, but it's actually pretty simple what it does if you can get it into a focused API. Yeah. So maybe I can, I'll actually do a quick sample of that.
Well, I had one more question before you start.
Yep.
So when you have like Shiny broken out into all of these packages, what do you see when you go to NuGet? Hang on one second.
Yep.
Sorry, I was getting a cough. So when you go to NuGet, is there a big Shiny bundle that includes everything, or is it all broken out?
No, it's all broken up because a lot of them are quite huge. The main package is Shiny Core. That really is what delivers all the infrastructure and the periodic jobs, because the periodic jobs are used in almost everything. The core drives all of these plugins at some point.
I see.
And really, it's what defines dependency injection in the whole 9 yards here.
And which one is the core? Is it the Shiny framework, or is it just the Shiny?
Shiny framework is something I've just included in this project. We won't even worry about that guy. It just kind of helps me write. This is really what's going to integrate Prism, Reactive UI, and all the cool stuff later on. That stuff I'm working on. But really, it's this guy, Shiny.
Okay.
This is going to be the official package at Come 2.0. That everyone will install, and this will bring in your core and kind of some of the source generator stuff that I'll show. Okay.
So if I was using if I just wanted Bluetooth LE, so you will give me Bluetooth LE and that Shiny package.
Yep. So it brings in, it's common.
Okay, got it.
Shiny core.
Okay.
And then Shiny includes stuff like source generators and stuff because there's a lot of boilerplate that comes in with this stuff and with kind of all the Xamarin plugins. Yeah. So I'll show kind of some of the cool things I'm doing there with 2.0 after.
Sure.
So this is our kind of, starting point for Shiny. It looked very much like ASP.NET Core, which was kind of one of my goals when I started this project, is that I wanted to have, that service collection. Let's see if I can zoom this over a bit. I wanted to have something that looked like an ASP.NET Core startup file, because that's really what a lot of the developers coming over in .NET really understand. That's how things work.
And it's funny you say that because you realize that that's what they're doing with Maui, right? I mean, they have heard the feedback, and that's kind of how a Maui app is supposed to start up now.
Yeah, I've kind of been talking to that about them for years, and that's really where the audience is coming from, right? It's not your native developers from iOS or Android coming. It's your ASP and WPF developers that want to come in here and use this stuff. So I really wanted to reflect that when I did this. And it turns out that actually the Microsoft extensions, the dependency injection stuff is actually quite fast in comparison to a lot of other containers that are out there. So, and it's quite extensible. So it made logical sense to kind of use that and start to build off of that framework or that DI container in terms of comfort. So basically with Shiny, it's slightly different. I've prefixed everything with Shiny so everybody knows what the heck it is. It does have some opinions on how things should run because it needs to. But here you could do stuff like, just like ASP.NET, you could register your own services so that Shiny can use them. So often you see like data services and whatnot you can throw in here. But to register a Shiny service, and kind of to go back to your question about push, is here you can do native push, and I'll explain the delegate in a second, or Azure notification hubs. So I'm going to actually bring up both of these. We'll get to that delegate in a second. So this guy really only needs a listener config, like a connection string, and the hub name. But if I wanted to, let's say I wanted to go native for whatever reason, maybe Azure goes out of business, which I don't see that ever happening. You could switch back to native. And there's actually another, like I said, there's a couple of these drivers out there. There's also a native Firebase that works with iOS and Android. I won't show them now, just because it doesn't serve any purpose other than seeing this one line of code change, because that's really all that's changing to swap between these push providers. But let's go ahead and write a delegate, and I'll show you what I mean by how they change.
Okay, Alan, two more questions before you move off.
Sure.
First thing, why the name Shiny?
Let me explain that. It's kind of a little bit of a diss. People that generally tend to get NuGet packages. I made this little joke to Dan a few years ago. They want to update their NuGets right away. So at some point I did the voice in Gollum, and they said, I must have my Shinies. They'd update their NuGets and things would break. And I was like, well, why did you update them? Like, breaking changes are going to happen. And it's like, people just, I don't know why they have this drive to update their NuGet packages.
Well, I mean, there is an update available. I just updated it.
And they would do this, and things would, the APIs would change because you'd be crossing major boundaries. And I was like, I don't understand the need. Like, what's going on here? And the other thing is that Xamarin has notoriously been focused almost 100% on UI. They don't tend to focus on, the architecture of your apps. I know they're doing it now in Maui, but they haven't focused on that architecture at all. And I think that's kind of what created a little bit of the havoc that goes on kind of in the community. Like, how do I build these apps?
Yep.
So it was kind of a rip at that. There's nothing UI centric in Shiny. It's all how your code shines. And that's kind of how I came up with the name. So it was a little bit of a mock about people updating their NuGets. And funny. It was definitely a thing to say there's more to building mobile applications than UI.
Just UI. Yeah.
And in fact, when I'm recommending to my customers, I'm not talking about UI stuff a lot of the times when I'm doing mobile. Because if I'm selling them a mobile app, then I'm probably bringing in like location or camera or something that's going to make a mobile app useful instead of just a UI. So that was all part of it. Kind of a little twist on words there, I guess is how it came up.
And one more question here. So this is great when you are starting up a greenfield project. But let's say I have an existing Xamarin Forms app and I bring in Shiny. I don't have these configure services things. I mean, how would I plug and play?
So it's very easy to still work with Shiny without dependency injection and stuff. I'll show kind of how it. Actually, why don't I bring the service in here?
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I'm gonna actually comment this out because I don't need to run it to show it. So here I haven't put Prism or anything into this application. So this is your standard kind of code behind. It's even still got the app one, the default template name. So it really doesn't matter where you go within the app. Like if you want to use your code behinds, which I hope you aren't doing, you can. If you've got view models, like your standard view model with an INPC and no framework, it'll work there too. because Shiny still has to have a host. So this is kind of like, I guess, your equivalent of app in Xamarin Forms. It's a static that exists everywhere because it kind of has to. Pretty much every framework you have needs to have something where everything sits. So Shiny has this. You can resolve if I want a push the push plugin that we were talking about. So I'll bring this guy out. Right, and now we have access to all of its methods.
Okay, yeah,
and what we can do with it.
That's simple. So essentially, like Shiny Host is an in-memory object and you do DI to just bring in whichever one you need and resolve that. And then you have access to it.
This is more your what do they call it? Service provider pattern.
Yeah.
If you need it, it's there. And like I said, if you use something like Prism, which pretty much everyone, I hope everyone's using, this is designed to work as DI, so you can put it right into your view model. And Dan and I have a whole bunch of stuff that we do there to get that to work.
Yeah, and I know Dan helps you out. So this is Dan Siegel, folks. If you have mentioned Dan a million times, it's our good friend Dan Siegel, and then he's been on the show talking about what latest he's doing with Prism with Brian. All good stuff. Pick a framework, and sometimes like. I've been in like hackathons or other things where people get all hung up on a framework, but some of it is going to built in as well. Like at least we can start out the architecture thinking about view models, thinking about separating our concerns. Yeah.
Well, it really helps. Like I said, the Shiny came of people trying to write these big monolithic frameworks and stuff. But when you've got a community and an ecosystem driving these frameworks, you really end up with a battle-tested, best of breed type of thing. Like they've dealt with these problems. They found new, better ways to solve them. And instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, go with where people are going, follow that trend a little bit.
Yep.
And I realize that a lot of what Xamarin shows is like the hello world and stuff. But as you start to get into these bigger monolithic applications, that framework is really going to help drive a solid path forward.
Yep. All right. Sorry to keep derailing you with questions, but it looks like you have resolved it, and now you're good to use Shiny, right?
Yeah, and it just, you can use it just however the interface works. There's nothing special to it anymore. Now, to show off kind of what I mean about how push notifications are pretty solid and pretty easy to work with, I'm going to create my push delegate. And also I want to explain this, I call this a delegate, and we're kind of used to the .NET world as events, but events don't really work in your backgrounding world because you need something to kind of, that's hooked for you, that just starts working. And events tend to leak memory. If anybody's ever written anything with .NET events and they don't deallocate in a when your window's closing or something, you're going to leak that memory. So .NET events just don't seem to apply very well to the backgrounding world. So here I've gone ahead and implemented an interface. I'll explain what these do in a minute, but I'm going to come back to here and just show. So I'm going to put in my push delegate, which I just created, and that's it. So push notifications, minus some of the native setup you have to do, and obviously your server setup. I can now switch between Firebase, one Signal, AWS, and Azure notifications in one line of code. Nice. And it's going to work the same everywhere. The only deviation that tends to happen between them is some support what's called tagging. So you can tag your user as, this is user APC, or maybe this guy is a certain user role, and you can put them in tags. We'll leave that out of discussion for the most part. It's there. It's feature flagged if you need to use them. But for the most part here, I can switch now to Azure Notification Hubs. Like let's say I wanted to upgrade, and now all I have to do is pass in those two arguments, and everything's going to work identical to the way it did before. Nice. And that's what's cool, because really everything revolves around this guy. So this delegate is really how things are going to drive through your application. So for instance, when your push token is going to change, which this tends to happen in Firebase a lot, When you're receiving an actual push notification, this is the big guy. This is where you're going to tend to do stuff in the background, like content is available. You may inject like an HTTP service here and do something like you may want to go and get your content here and save it in your database on the push notification. And it does contain a lot of data in here. Push notifications generally tend to have a dictionary of what's coming in. So you can get that data here, and this will run in the background for you. And this is the big guy, right? Like we haven't attached to any UI. The main point here is this: we're just dealing with these events. Somehow this guy is magically going to fire for me consistently on Android and iOS and UWP to a lesser degree. And it's all just there, right? I don't need to worry about Xamarin Forms or MVP across. It's just going to run. And last but not least is on entry. This is kind of when users tap on your notification. This piggybacks on the local notifications a bit. And one of the things about notifications is I wanted to have the best of breed for local notifications. I wanted that library to do everything, every customization imaginable. So if you want to do set the color of the notification, set the icons of the notification, schedule them, and work with actions. Actions is actually a big one. When you get a notification, you want to say yes or no without ever going into your app. You can do all that here. The response comes in with, what action was running. And if you even had like a text entry, I don't know if anyone ever seen when you reply to a text message, you can actually reply right in the message. You see a pop down come in, you can enter the text and reply right here. So you never even have to enter the application. This will all happen in the background. So you can actually reply from notifications to a message right in the OS without ever hitting the app. And the reason this is particularly good is because you might not even have Xamarin Forms running at all yet. Like your dependency injection layer, Prism, all that stuff, it hasn't even entered the picture. And that's what was powerful about this, is we needed to really decouple from our UI layer.
Okay, so questions on this. When you say like the response to a push notification, like you're writing here, like that is code you're writing here, but the app may not be running. So how do you enable this to run on the background?
So the app doesn't have to run. So the way Shiny hooks is in your app delegate, your app delegate is still going to keep your app kind of cold or in kind of a sleep mode. And if it doesn't, it's still going to spin up your app delegate. It's just not going to spin up your UI.
I see.
And same with Android. Now, Android is a bit different. I can kind of show some of those hooks in a minute. Android, the traditional thing with Xamarin Forms apps is to have a main activity. Main activity is way too late in the life cycle to get this stuff running. So we actually have to get one step ahead of that, and that's the application. And this guy you're starting to see appear in more and more applications, just because this is always going to run the first time your app kind of gets kicked up, whether that's by a notification or a device reboot or whatever the case may be. This guy will always run before your broadcast receivers or your services, and it'll give you enough to get your dependency injection and services in place.
Interesting.
And this is kind of all the magic there. This guy right here is just saying, we don't know what this is doing, but it's doing a lot of stuff. And then I'm passing in my Shiny startup, which is what we were looking at right here.
Yeah.
And that's kind of going to get everything in place.
And do you need a hook like this for iOS?
Yes. So why don't I go ahead and show you all the hooks?
Yep.
So this is a fully banged out app with every single hook installed. And it kind of sucks. I'm not gonna lie. All these plugin hooks that we have to do, I'm opening them and I'll explain all of them.
The reality is like if you have a need to use all of it, that's when it'll be so much. But if you're just using one or two things, just know how to do that.
Exactly. But this is a fully framed front to back using every single plugin that Shiny has to offer with every single hook. So for instance, we're looking at iOS. So here we are in an app delegate. I've left it pretty much standard from the template. This is the only line of code I've added. Generally, we'd see a whole bunch of other initialization stuff going on here. But for now, I just left it as a default. So we've got our Xamarin Forms, our load application, our finish launching for Shiny. And then we've got kind of all these other hooks like perform fetch. So this is kind of how I background periodic jobs run on Shiny. I kind of piggyback on this guy. This is for your background downloads, uploads and downloads. And then there's 3 hooks in App Delegate for push notifications. So it sucks. Having to hook all of these and explain it in documentation is notoriously been a problem. and we're going to come back.
I mean, you have to do this. Otherwise, yeah.
Let's just say in 2.0, I've got this covered. I'm going to show kind of an example of how I delete all of this code in a few minutes. And it still just works.
Well, the good news also is your camera is now back to being crystal clear. So
excellent. Okay. Yeah. So now this is our main activity. I've got Essentials in here just to kind of show what I'm going to do with that as well. There's another couple hooks that both Essentials and Shiny are using now, and there's more coming, right? Like Android's always constantly changing and evolving how the permissions work and activity results. This kind of comes and goes.
That's a lot of headache that you're taking on. Every time Android or iOS changes. Yeah,
but the good thing is that if you do this right, it becomes as easy as code genning it away. So I like to show this because a lot of people go, holy, I got to do all that boilerplate every time. And it's actually one of my number one support headaches is trying to explain to people, you got to do this hook. Or, and you can document it. Somebody's still going to miss it, right? And that sucks because it really kind of drains life out of the project trying to explain this every time. So I'll jump ahead a little bit and just explain what I wanted to do with Shiny 2 was get rid of all of this. I don't want to have to do any of this. I basically want all that to go away. I don't even want this file to exist. And for App Delegate, same thing. I want this all to just disappear. I don't want any of it. It's all in my face. It's not doing me anything. I just want an app to work, and I want it to do most of the work. Now people are going to go, well, you can't do that because then Forms and Essentials and all those things start to break. So with 2.0, for those that have used Shiny, I went on to do source generating. So this is a new thing with they do mark .NET 5 on this and C# 9, but the fact is this works with .NET Core 3 just fine. So source generators are just a fancy way of at compile time building code out of metadata, whatever the case may be, and really kind of adding on. We've seen this for years, but we haven't had a really nice way of doing it. I mean, XAML does it as you compile. They build your XAML into actual C# code. This is kind of the equivalent. If anybody comes from those classic ASP.NET web form days, we had that code behind, and then we had that partial code behind. So as we created buttons, it magically just showed up, but the variable just existed in the generated class. So this is kind of doing the same, and I'm kind of doing the same trick. So by marking your app delegate as partial, which kind of comes out of the box, and your main activity is partial, I'm now able to start doing some cool things. And this guy, you know what, let's just delete the file because it doesn't even need to be there. So I have this magical little assembly-wide attribute, and I've put it on my iOS, above my iOS delegate. Seems like a good logical place for it. And I'm actually going to put this over into my main activity as well. Because again, this is where Xamarin Forms spins up. This is what people expect. And what I've done here is I've said, this is my Shiny startup name. So it was called App1 My Shiny Startup. So it's the full qualified name. And I've also done this for my Xamarin Forms app type. So what this is going to do is when I compile it, we're going to see if anything's screwed up here. And then I'll share another screen in a minute to show what it kind of goes and generates.
How are you like letting, well, I suppose like the Xamarin Forms init, how is that being hooked up when you say Xamarin Forms app type name?
So I'm going to show you right now. I'm going
Okay.
to share this other screen. As soon as I can make it big. All right, I'm just going to switch this. You can't see. There we go. And we'll do this guy. So this is what just got generated. So I've gotten it to emit files. So the code generator is actually running in the background and going to create all of this fun stuff.
Oh, look at that.
You can see it created. So this basically, when we looked at our other app, I deleted all that code. It has gone and created a partial app delegate matching the name of whatever your app delegate is. It's plugged in all the Shiny stuff. It's plugged in the Xamarin Form stuff. It even sees other third-party plugins that I like to use. So anybody that knows XF Material, it sees that library is referenced by your project, and it's gone and initted that for you as well. From the Android side, same thing. I even took the time to initialize Xamarin Essentials because this is really where you should be doing Xamarin Essentials. And last but not least, the main activity. It's actually hooked up all the Shiny hooks that we saw before. It's hooked up kind of those tab resources that you generally need for forms. It's gone and initialized Xamarin Forms for you. And again, XF Material, as well as doing all the permissions and activity results. And then once again, you see Essentials here as well. So I'm just generating all that code so that I don't need to deal with it, and that the support doesn't become a nightmare to deal with all these hooks. And as Android releases new hooks, if you've got the Shiny package installed and you update it, I'm actually just able to install this code for you. So the users don't even need to say, there's a new on permissions request hook in Android 12, for example. I don't think there is, thankfully. But if there was, I could generate that code automatically and pull from it without the user having to do anything. So that's a huge step forward in having to deal with the support aspects that happen with that, and to keep it kind of flowing forward without everybody having to know, Android 12 came out, have you read the documentation on this? Because the answer is 9 out of 10 times none of us have, right? So that was a big deliverable for 2.0.
Yeah, this is sweet. Now, could you go back to the app delegate one time, please?
Sure.
So back to something that you had said, like when you are hooking up these delegates and you're doing it when you are like the app1.myshiny startup, like do you have to unhook anything, or is that okay?
Because everything in Shiny is static. Everything is a singleton under the hood. We still use DI, but really in a mobile app, it lives for the life cycle of the application. So it makes sense to make everything static. So as you register it, I add them all as singletons. But something important to notice, and I'll go back to Visual Studio in a second, is you don't have to worry about that, how it's registering or the state or any of that nonsense. You just have to say use push. However many services and plugins it's installed under the hood, doesn't matter. It's dealt with for you. And that was really important to deal with how things are done, because I wanted to make it easy.
I see. So theoretically, if I am running a Xamarin Forms app, which has the Shiny startup, and my app is in the background, I actually explicitly kill it, right?
Yep.
And then you still have a push coming in, then all you will do is just that delegate needs to be like, it'll just come alive and just do its thing through the DI, and that's it.
Yep. You don't have to change anything. So this plugin is, you just need the hooks, or you need the code gen to do it for you. And it'll just take care of it. So on iOS, it'll just restore the app, kick off your delegate, and you do whatever you need to do. Now with the delegates, I generally tell people, don't look at the UI. Don't try and talk to the UI directly. These are intended for background. And as it is anyways, I give nice little foreground helpers Because sometimes, you know, if you're writing a chat application, maybe you want to listen to for push notifications. There are foreground methods to deal with it right off the push manager. But from your delegates, they are meant to be UI free. They shine in the background, just to play on words there.
That's well, nice way of saying it. They shine in the background. Cool. This is very cool.
So I'll go back to Visual Studio here for a second.
Yeah.
And application window, and we'll do this guy. So from here, I'm able to do a lot of the things. Let me delete these guys. So this is just push. Push is a pretty simple mechanism. I love this one. It came out pretty good. I know Dan's now using it a lot in his apps because he was. Thank Dan for this one. This is really his push to get me to do it. But going kind of back to what you were asking about, you know, how we register these things. And kind of the adding singletons and stuff. We don't want to worry about that stuff. Whether they're singleton or transient shouldn't matter. So from here, I'm able to do all of my, you know, if you want to use the Bluetooth, there's the Bluetooth client. If you want to use, you know, if you want to register your own services, they add singletons there as you need it. But really, I've tried to kind of follow the Microsoft way of how they enter all their services is with the use. So all of the Shiny services are in the Shiny namespace. So every NuGet that I've installed, it sees pretty much every event right here and every service that you can use. Like there's GPS, there's some of the sensors, heart rate, background transfers. It's all right there. So I tried to make it as discoverable as possible, considering the raw amount of stuff going on. Because it's quite a large library. I could spend an entire two of these talking about Bluetooth or GPS. Mm-hmm. It's almost impossible to get these through in one talk nowadays.
I'm sure. Yeah.
Generally, I tend to focus on push notifications because I think it's one of a kind right now. But things like geofencing and GPS, they're pretty much understood. I mean, this is how you get a GPS ping. You cross a geofence. This is how it works. So I generally tend not to focus on them and just focus on the unique stuff. Yeah. That being said, something about the GPS client, I also do a couple unique things there for people. It does work. So from Android again is in there being a pain in the butt. If you've done any GPS or geofencing with Android, you end up with what's called Google Play services. So you have certain providers that only work with Google Play services. And that's kind of frustrating because a lot of devices don't have Google Play services. Shiny actually does a piggyback. It can work with the standard out of the box Android X location manager when Google Play services aren't available. And same for geofencing. Now the geofencing library there basically falls back to a GPS and does all the geofencing manually for you. But it does that by doing nothing else other than use geofencing. So you don't have to figure that stuff out. It's just going to do it for you. So that's, again, another kind of unique little twist that I try and put in the library to save people headache. And because I've had to deal with this problem myself before. Who knew Google Play services weren't on all of the Google OS devices? This kind of
it's Android, right? So you got lots of variations.
Yeah, very fragmented environment and very very difficult to deal with all those changes.
Yeah. So every time iOS or Android does a big push, like, do you lose some sleep over all of the things that you have to update or keep an eye out on?
iOS, no. iOS has been. I'm a bit of an iOS fan in the fact that their APIs generally just tend to work. I know a lot of people think they don't, but I've done so many apps. They do a good job of deprecation. They had a hiccup with Bluetooth a few years ago where they changed the way that permissions were working, which kind of sucked. And they've got one right now that if you don't put something in the info P list to say that you're using Bluetooth, Xamarin doesn't deal with the crash and your app kind of just, which that stinks. but it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But the APIs have always just been like a rock. They never give you any hassle. Android, they keep changing it. For years, it was services. Then it was broadcast receivers. Now we're kind of at a mix and match scenario where you still need services on occasion, but you've still got broadcast receivers. So you kind of just have to stay up to trends with it. And that's kind of what I wanted to deal with Shiny, was if they flip it, I can manage it. So for instance, in GPS, a lot of people want to get that real-time GPS in the background, but you can't really do that on Android anymore. You need to have what's called a foreground service. So you need to have a nice little notification up, and that's how it's going to run now. But that keeps changing. Yep.
Yeah. So Alan, just hold your thought for just 1 second here, because I was seeing some of our friends, hey Rick, in the chat room, but what I'm just seeing is Mr. C# Fritz has arrived with his party of 100+ audience. So hello, welcome Raiders here, welcome Raiders. This is Code It Live. This is the .NET Dev Show that we do every Thursday. Thankfully, I'm not coding today. You are in much better hands with Allan Ritchie. And I'm going to highlight the thing that we have been talking about. This is Shiny. So Alan and me are old, and we have done a lot of XAML and a lot of Xamarin back in our days, and we still do. But Alan's got this library called Shiny, which brings in a lot of your background processing and sensor-specific handling to your iOS and Android apps. So that's what we're talking about. So Shiny is right now about 2 years old, right? Is what you said?
Yep. 2 years old.
Where do you stand right now? Like you're looking ahead at 2.0?
2.0 is essentially feature complete at this point. I'm working on some docs. I'm working on the blog post and a couple little bugs that have trickled in, but it is right on the verge of being released. Yeah, lots of big stuff that has to happen in the documentation, obviously, for this one.
Yeah.
But it's right there. I'm pretty much ready to go.
I mean, it's open source, so maybe we should all step up and try to help out Alan here. But so we talked about push. We talked about geofencing. Anything else that you're fond of? Anything else that you can quickly show us? Like looking through your packages, what else is super interesting?
Like I said, I could spend probably 3 talks just on BLE alone.
I'm sure.
So I won't go into that one too much. But BLE is probably one of the biggest deliverables in Shiny. If you use it properly, you can really do a lot of the hardcore things in like 2 or 3 lines of code. It handles all the reconnections. It handles really kind of cool ways of dealing with scanning. But it's all built on RX. So if you don't deal with reactive extensions, and I know a lot of people in the Microsoft community don't, or they haven't been exposed to that, it's not going to be really the most friendly or easy library for you to use out of the box. But things that I tell people for RX, like don't confuse complexity for power. And really, once you learn to use RX, I mean, that's all I use nowadays. I barely use async tasks anymore, other than for simple one-offs. I'm almost always using observables, and observables are at the core of everything Shiny does. They're not going away. It's kind of a hill I'm willing to die on. As well as DI, I am really willing to die on that hill. But something else I wanted to talk about really quick is there are a lot of people that do want consistency with Xamarin Essentials. They like their static classes. I don't want to support static classes. And the issue I run into is trying to keep those static classes up to date, because I could create static classes everywhere, but I don't want to. It's really a lot of work to maintain them and make sure that I have updated them. And I forget every release. I did this in 1.0 and I forgot every release. So also part of the code gen stuff now is there's a cool little method that'll look at all the NuGet packages you've provided to the library, and it'll generate static classes for every Shiny service that exists. And that's just have to put an attribute in. I think I have it here.
So Alan, let's back up one step here. Binary Nexus is asking, and I was actually going to ask you this, like your take. What is RX? Can you explain reactive extensions for us, please?
Sure.
I know it's like a big word to get into, but just like real brief, what is it and how does it help?
It's a clever way of dealing with event streams. You can filter them, you can process them, you can aggregate them. It's a really friendly way of dealing with events in .NET. It's really able to help you out with kind of some of the traditional .NET problems in terms of if you've ever used a .NET event, I'm pretty sure everybody in the chat could put up their hand and say how many times they forgot to deallocate it. Especially coming out of web forms world, again, if you're old like me, we didn't have to.
Yeah,
yours isn't quite as gray as mine. You're lucky in that. We didn't have to deallocate events back then, and it was kind of cool because if you came from a C world or a C++ world, you know, we got hammered every time we didn't deallocate something. So when you entered web forms, you were like, I get to be lazy now. I'm not going to deallocate anything. But we're kind of back into that world where we need to be more efficient and deallocate. So with RX, it's able to garbage collect the observable subscriptions, whereas .NET events are kind of left, they leak because often they're held in some static resource or you've pinned something. But every subscription in RX is disposable. So the garbage collector can just say, get rid of yourself. I don't need you anymore. And it's all, you're not really able to pin anything the same way that you are with .NET events. And that processing is probably the hugest part of it. If you write an event, you know, maybe you want it to be time throttled or filtered like a link stream. You can do that with RX observables, whereas you really have to do all of that lifting yourself in a .NET event. And it's not as friendly. So I encourage people to really learn reactive extensions, especially in .NET. I know it's not as big as the other guys like the RxJS and the Java guys really love their RX. But in .NET, it's just as powerful. It's just as awesome. I hope people use it.
Yeah, no, well said, well said. Sorry, I interrupted you because you were trying to say something.
No, I just wanted to talk about just the fact that you can now generate static classes with Shiny. So if you don't like the dependency injection or calling Shiny host and you just want to call, like, say, Shiny BLE, you just have to add this friendly little helper. I'm not sure why it's... Oh, I've got it somewhere else in my library. That's why. I put it on this class. Let me go back here. You can only have it one place in your application. So I've got it in my assembly info. Oh. So I can basically just say, generate static classes, put it in this namespace. So if I go back here, I'll just type it out here. I now have Shiny accelerometer, Shiny push. Shiny push isn't there for whatever reason. Shiny BLE, it's all there. So it's gone and looked at all of the NuGet packages that have been installed with Shiny, and it's generated pretty much all the services and calls in a static way. So it looks very much like Essentials. So if that's the way you like to write code, I discourage it, and I don't do it out of the box for you, but it's there. And it's still fed by dependency injection one way or the other. So I feel like I've done my due diligence to force people to test their apps, but you can still use your statics.
Yeah. So speaking of Essentials, I do want to point out to this thing. So that link, folks, that is kind of where the future is headed, right? So we are looking at .NET MAUI, which is the evolution of Xamarin Forms, and how that is going to sit on top of .NET 6. And so far, like when you see Allan doing things like Xamarin Essentials, we are bringing in a NuGet package that gives us all of these sensors, but that is itself is evolving. And if you look through like some of the folders, that's getting evolved into MAUI Essentials, and they are changing up the startup to exactly what the screen you're looking at, the configure services. This is Jonathan Dick and all of those wonderful engineers on the Xamarin team. They're working to make sure things are better in .NET 6, and then how things are done with the DI and how Xamarin Essentials or MAUI Essentials is hooked up. So they're working and they're kind of all ears. So I encourage you folks to kind of go and work with them. It's all open source. tell them the things that are not quite right, so we can. I mean, we have a long runway even now between now and like November until when .NET 6 is out and .NET MAUI is out. You're going to get things right. So, Allan, have you looked at any of this stuff with Net 6?
Yeah, I actually talk to John and team quite frequently about this stuff because I'm looking how to integrate with MAUI almost from day one. I've been bouncing ideas around with John Dick for months now on how we do this. He's a great guy. You know, really, if you want to give feedback, he's probably the best. Him and David Art now are the best people to send feedback to. They really do listen. It's really a great ecosystem that they drive.
I'm going to put in John here. His Reddit on the internet. So yeah, things are evolving, and for your 2.0, like once you say it, Allan, like you're live on the internet, you have to hold your word.
Yeah.
But we're not going to make you do that. But any timeframes as to when you are thinking of rolling this out?
Well, I was trying to do it today, but
okay.
You know, it's probably going to happen more like next week. I try to make it close to those Xamarin stand-ups, so that the community stand-up, it goes in the community stand-up. But
is there one today? I think there is one today, right?
Yeah, and it won't make the deadline, and I wanted to have like the blog post and everything in there.
Yeah. Take your time.
Yeah, there's no hurry. So
take your time to do it right.
Exactly. So it's going to probably happen for the next one, but generally probably in the next couple of weeks is when I hope to actually push out the 2.0 release for people to start using. Plus, like I said, there's a lot of documentation. If there's any wonderful documenters in the world, I would love your help. Would love it.
Yeah. And this is the Shiny org. This is the whole repo that Allan is talking about. So go poke around, go see what's happening. And we are past our time of trying to go an hour, but this was very interesting. Allan, I want to thank you for all that you do every iOS and every Android release to make sure Shiny does all of the right things in the background, and the way you think about maintaining sanity in our code bases like testability and how you're using delegates. That's a lot of work, and you've been doing this nonstop for like 2+ years now. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, folks. So everyone who came in from Mr. Fritz's show, which I don't know what he was doing today, but he's been doing Clip Talk. He's doing a lot of, Blazor. So I don't know what he was doing, but thank you all for coming out and hanging out with us. This is the .NET Dev Show, and we'll be back next Thursday doing something else. I don't know. I actually want to tinker with some more Blazor hybrid stuff. You know what's going on, Allan, on the Blazor stuff, right? They're trying to get it to work nicely on mobile and desktop, which is it's fun. Hang on, let me bring this out because this is kind of fun to see where this is going. So there's something called mobile Blazor bindings, right? And I'm going to drop a link here so we can all go look. It's experimental, obviously, so don't go do production apps with it yet. But it's a fun way for us to be able to use Blazor and bring that over to mobile and desktop. And I think they're going to try to focus on desktop first. So your desktop apps can run inside of a web shell. This is not Electron.js. This is not using Node, not shipping with Node.js or Chromium. It is using WebView 2, or it's WK WebView if you're using the Safari. But the story is nice to be able to bring Blazor goodness into desktop. I want to tinker a little bit more because some of it is also you can mix and match native and hybrid stuff. But right now, so Allan, you'll maybe get a chuckle out of this, but right now the way they bootstrap this is like straight up Xamarin Forms, and it's using the Mac and the WPF renderers for Xamarin Forms, which have kind of been sidelined for years now. Yep. So it's not quite using the latest and greatest thing, but I know they're working to make this work nicely on .NET 6. So they will bring in MAUI, they will bring in the way they do configure services and how they bootstrap the app. and then maybe we'll have more confidence bringing Blazor onto the desktop. So yeah, I want to tinker a little bit more with that. Maybe that's what I'll do next week.
And as a note, Shiny is looking at hitting the WebAssembly in the very near future.
Nice.
There's some experiments going on.
Very cool. Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, in a way, like the world is our oyster, like with things like Uno platform, with things like Blazor, and then WebAssembly. There are just so many ways to mix and match and kind of take your code places. But at the same time, like on the same token, like I did a thing where somebody was asking me, how can you build a Windows desktop app today? And I gave them like 10 options, because that's how many ways in which you can hit the Windows desktop, which is funny, but it can also be confusing, right? Because you have to choose the technology stack that you want. So is it WPF? Stick to it. It's fine. It runs on .NET 5, runs on .NET 6. But if you want to look ahead, then you have choices like Blazor Hybrid. You have WebAssembly that might even take your XAML to the web. So lots of things to mix and match with and play around. So I think it's an exciting time for all of us as .NET devs.
Definitely. It's about time we have a consistent push towards a .NET UI framework too.
Yeah,
it's really kind of missing. We need a solid framework to go towards.
Yeah, and maybe Maui is the step in the right direction, but I mean, I can see, like, even for .NET Maui, it's a lot of moving pieces for them. So I don't blame them that they're focusing on iOS, Android, Windows, and Mac. So let's get that right. Because even like on a Mac, you can come to it from Catalyst, you can come to it through Hybrid, and then on Windows, they're trying to use the latest with WinUI 3. So let the dust settle after November. Then hopefully Maui can go to Linux and it can go to WebAssembly and other places. So,
well, if you look at what they're doing with the Maui architecture, I mean, that's really the goal, is to have an abstract platform that can go where you need it. So it's definitely exciting.
Yeah,
definitely exciting.
Absolutely. So, Allan, thank you again for all that you do. I know you're super busy, but thank you for taking the time out to come and show us all things Shiny. No pun intended, because this is Shiny. Let Shiny do its thing in the background, and yeah, you'll be happier. So, folks in the chat room, thank you so much for hanging out with us. I think that's the show for this Thursday. Come and hang out with us any other time. We are on pretty much every day of the week, and I'll be back on with the .NET Dev Show next Thursday. So, until then, stay productive. Yeah, stay healthy. That's a big part of what we can all do now, and hopefully the year shapes up to be a little bit more normal than things are today. So until then, yeah, stay well, and we shall see you on the next stream.
Thanks, everybody.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, and bye for now.